Our presentation is on the satirical analysis of Animal Farm. A preview of how our presentation will be laid out is we're going to start with the critical argument, followed by explaining the historical particulars. Then we'll go into manifest fiction. Then we'll talk about the attack or critique. And we will end with our 2 discussion questions. So the critical argument that we came up with was that this book satirizes how people blindly follow corrupt leadership while filling stereotypical society roles along the way. So the historical particulars of a satire refer to things from its time period. An important thing from this time period was widespread censorship and propaganda. So starting off with the censorship aspect, this time period during when the book was written was during World War II. The book was written during 1943 to 1944, but had to wait until after World War II was over in 1945 to be published due to censorship, since the book was directly critiquing the Russian Revolution and Soviet Union. During this time, a lot was censored. For example, the United States had an Office of Censorship, the United Kingdom had a Ministry of Information, and in the Soviet Union, Stalin had strict controls over medias and punished those who disagreed with him. So as you can see, censorship was a big thing during this time period. Moving on to the propaganda aspect, we also see a lot of propaganda being used during this time period, which refers to framing information in a specific light to influence the way people will view or perceive that information. It was used during that time period to shape people's opinions of the war and strengthen morale. So a quote from Animal Farm about censorship is that he announced that by a special decree of Comrade Napoleon, Beast of England had been abolished. From now onwards, it was forbidden to sing. And this quote is a direct example of censorship being seen on Animal Farm. The song plays a significant role in the novel by serving as an anthem for the farm animals that captures the ideas of freedom and keep the animals motivated and revolting. The song is described by the narrator as so memorable that even the stupidest of them had already picked it up, which shows how easily the animals adopt ideology without question. This blind acceptance mirrors how people in society often latch onto slogans or movements without fully understanding them simply because they're catchy or popular. Napoleon's ban on the song, the very anthem that inspired rebellion, illustrates how Napoleon's corrupt leadership is discarding the original ideals of freedom and thought of a better life that the group agreed to fight for. So as you can see by this quote, the book stays true towards censorship norms seen during the time period the book was written. And in a more direct relation to the critical argument, we argued that people often blindly follow corrupt leadership and conform to societal roles in the process. The quote supports that argument by showing how the animals on the farm accepted the permanent banning of their anthem without resistance. They didn't question Napoleon's decision or challenge his authority, they simply complied, illustrating the animals' blind obedience. By banning Beasts of England, Napoleon begins to take the role of a dictator, using censorship to limit the animals.
So we all know that Orwell's Animal Farm is satirizing the Russian Revolution, but he pokes fun at all the leaders throughout Russia's history. And he does so by making the main characters in Animal Farm represent certain political figures, even groups of people during the Russian Revolution. And he uses many forms of satire throughout this book to really let the reader know that they're reading a satirical book. So starting at the beginning of the book, the main man on the farm is Old Major. Old Major represents Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. He represents Marx because he wants everyone on the farm to be equal, just like Karl Marx wanted a communist government and country and wanted everyone to be equal. And then he represents Lenin, obviously, because Lenin was the one that started the Russian Revolution, and Old Major started the Animal Revolution. Then it's Napoleon. Napoleon is the main antagonist on the farm, named after the infamous leader, Napoleon Bonaparte, who was known for being a dictator and just kind of an asshole, like how Napoleon is portrayed in the book. He also represents Joseph Stalin, who was power crazy and flipped Russia upside down and set them back by years. And he did the whole country wrong just for his own gain, like how Napoleon the pig did wrong by his fellow animals for his own gain. Then there's Snowball. Snowball is one of the most intelligent animals on the farm. It was his idea to make the windmill. And Napoleon had felt threatened by Snowball, so Napoleon used his trained dogs to chase Snowball off the farm and never come back. And this is satirizing Leon Trotsky being exiled from Russia by Joseph Stalin and Joseph Stalin's followers. And then there's Boxer, who's a horse on the farm. He's the hardest working character, And he obviously then represents the working class of Russians during the revolution, who were just kind of blind to the fact and just kept working hard like crazy, just like how Boxer in the book just keeps working hard no matter who's in charge. Then there's Napoleon's dogs. They represent the secret Russian police that Stalin had working for him. And the dogs and Joseph Stalin's secret police both follow orders from their leader, Joseph Stalin, and Napoleon being the dogs' leaders. And they remind me of Judge Dredd. And then there's another pig, Squealer. And then Squealer, his name's very fitting, not just because pigs squeal, but because he was a big supporter of Napoleon. And Squealer then represents the propaganda that was in Soviet and Communist Russia at the time in the Russian Revolution. And he's always standing up for Napoleon and tells the sheep how great he is. And then speaking of the sheep, they just listen to Squealer and just believe everything they are told, just like most of and a lot of the Russian population believing all the Stalin's propaganda that was going through the country at the time. And then in terms of satire, Orwell uses allegory, which is a version of satire that allows him to create the characters and mold them into real political people and ideas. And then there's Squealer, who is sort of a parody, which is another form of satire because it's mimicking the job of Soviet propaganda rather than a real person. And then at the end of the book, they end up in a worse position than they were at the beginning. And this is reversal satire because they kind of do a full 360. And at the end of the books, the rest of the farms on the pig, or the rest of the animals on the farm couldn't differentiate the pigs from the humans. Just kind of like how the Russian Revolution went down. Just kind of backfired.
A bit of the satire of Animal Farm hinges on its characters representing stereotypical societal roles. There are stereotypes being represented in nearly every character of the book, but these are just a few that speak the loudest. First, you have Napoleon, who manipulates his way into power and continues to do so in order to stay there. There's Snowball, who plays the role of Napoleon's opposition, loses the favor of the public, and is continually the subject of their tall tales afterwards. Then there's Boxer, the resident workaholic who feels everything can be fixed by working harder. We also see satire attacking the cog in the machine stereotype, as Boxer is hauled off to make glue when he can no longer work. His usefulness in his hard work had run out, and he was sent off and milked for every last bit of his worth to benefit the system that had been exploiting him. We also have the sheep, who play the clueless and impressionable public that listen to whoever speaks the loudest and the prettiest. They bleat on, not questioning anything they hear before repeating it mindlessly. Their basic nature is seen time and time again, but especially in Chapter 5, pages 47 and 48. Here it states, "Of late, the sheep had taken to bleating 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, both in and out of season, and they often interrupted meetings with this." While there are many other roles represented in this book, we see these main 4 most prevalently represented in our real-world societies and within the stories we create.
Form or manifest fiction of the satire. I find the statement all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others to be one of the most prominent satirical lines in Animal Farm. I believe it shows the unfairness and corruption that happens in a society that claims to be founded and reinforced with equality, but ends up reinforcing a new form of inequality. The phrase satirizes how people in power manipulate people's minds and ideals to justify their privileged position. When Animal Farm originally started, the main commandment of the farm was all animals are equal due to how they had been treated unfairly and not equally by humans. However, as the pigs slowly progress and gain more control, they go on to alter the commandment to suit their personal needs and benefits. For example, the animals start with a very clear list of the 7 commandments that promote equality, but over time the pigs secretly change them, knowing the animals are not smart enough to remember. I believe the satire of this is the mockery of the authoritarian regimes, changing laws that benefit the elite while also pretending like nothing has changed. I believe the book makes it clear that the working classes often overlook or are uneducated to notice or challenge the manipulations of the elite. This aligns again with the pigs who were supposed to lead animals to freedom and fairness, but instead become almost indistinguishable from the oppressive humans they sought to rebel against. This exposes how political figures use slogans and propaganda to disguise their abuse of power. For example, the pigs, especially through Squealer, constantly use fear of Mr. Jones' return. This mocks how totalitarian leaders use fear and propaganda to suppress and maintain inequality, while also claiming to protect its people, which I find to be very satirical. Orwell shows us how language is twisted in the text by redefining equality. The pigs end up turning it into a tool for their dominance in the final scene. The animals look through the window and can no longer tell the difference between the pigs and humans. I believe this is the ultimate expression of satire. Orwell is showing how the pigs who once promised equality and change have become just like the tyrants that they overthrew. The satire here exposes how having too much power can corrupt a person.
I will be covering one of the first attack or critiques in Animal Farm, which is how Orwell doesn't just criticize leaders, but he shows how they use manipulation and language to turn selfishness into something that looks noble. One of the clearest examples of this satire is when Squealer, the propaganda pig, explains why the pigs are keeping the milk and apples for themselves. The quote is, "You do not imagine, I hope that we pigs are doing this in the spirit of selfishness and privilege. Many of us actually dislike milk and apples. I dislike them myself. Our sole object in taking these things is to preserve our health." In this quote, Orwell is satirizing how those in power justify unfair treatment by pretending they're making sacrifices. Squealers claim that the pigs don't enjoy the extra food and that they just need it to stay healthy is manipulative. He's using fake humility to hide his greed, and Orwell wants us to see the absurdity of this logic. It's a common tactic in corrupt systems that leaders claim they're taking more not because they want to, but because they must, for the good of the people. Orwell is mocking this exact kind of excuse. The satire lies in how ridiculous and dishonest it is, but also in how easily the other animals believed it. This moment shows the beginning of how language becomes a tool of control. Squealer doesn't use violence, he uses persuasion, and he appeals to fear and guilt, saying the pigs need the apples or Jones might come back. And because the animals are tired, uneducated, and hopeful, they accept it. This quote shows how Orwell uses satire to critique the way power protects itself. It's not about big speeches or dramatic betrayals, but it's about the small lies disguised as responsibility through Squealer's fake selfishness. Orwell was warning us that the real danger isn't always force, sometimes it's manipulation, dressed up as care.
In Animal Farm, another form of a satirical tack from Orwell is on the working class and how they continue to follow a corrupt leader no matter the circumstances. In Animal Farm, all animals are put to work and exploited while supporting their corrupt leaders, each animal fulfilling their societal role. Boxer's mottos, "I will work harder" and "Napoleon is always right," demonstrates his loyalty and devotion to blind leaders. Boxer's commitment to work becomes satirical for how authoritarian systems exploit loyal workers for gain, taking advantage of them. These workers accept their jobs and do their work, and they are discarded once they are no longer useful. An authoritarian government does not care for the health or safety of its workers, it only values the completion of tasks. The workers gain no benefits and continuously do not stand up for themselves. Orwell criticizes a society where individuals fail to question authority and just follow their assigned roles. Squealer tells the animals, "Do not imagine, comrades, that leadership is a pleasure. On the contrary, it is a deep and heavy responsibility. No one believes more firmly than Comrade Napoleon that all animals are equal. He would be only happy to let you make your own decisions for yourselves. But sometimes you might make the wrong decision, comrades, and then where should we be?" Squealer manipulates the other animals into accepting their oppression, making it seem like they require leadership to function. In reality, the animals believe they are being cared for, but in truth, they are being controlled. This directly correlates to the working class in America today. All the animals on the farm represent the working class except the pigs who control them, relating to bigger corporations and leaders. Overall, Orwell is a satirical attack on how people follow leaders who do not give them the benefits they deserve and or need to survive. Our two discussion questions are, why do people often fail to recognize corrupt leadership, and what roles do propaganda and misinformation play in this? And our second question is, what are the long-term consequences for societies that follow corrupt leaders without questioning their authority?